Didn't even get my joint rolled yet, but we did start the show on time with the intro, everything. So who's all here? Who's joining us right now?
Welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We have, of course, Jamie Lowell, our host, who you just heard. I'm Rick Thompson. We're featuring Deborah Young, Jim Salame, and Mr. Hashbash, Adam Brook today.
Right on. Let's hear from, check out who our great sponsors are.
Just to review those folks, we have Real Leaf Solutions, Redemption Cannabis Company, Grow Green MI, Detroit Nutrient Company, and The Botanical Company, sponsors of Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
Yeah, and Botanical Company just opened up a new location in Kalkaska. It's a soft opening under medical, and in not too long, it'll get ramped up. The rec license will be in place, and in about 90 days, there will be the social lounge featuring the John Sinclair Cafe right next door up there. So Kalkaska will be a happening place this summer and fall. It is all year round. It's not like the east side of the state where it's kind of like very, very seasonal. There a lot of hunters and sportsmen, snowmobile riders, stuff like that hang out. There's stuff going on there year round.
Yeah.
So it'll be different than East Tawas a little bit, but we got some really good people there. Really good team getting that all ready. And our assistant manager from East Tawas went there to run it, Chris. So hope everybody has a great time and all that's working out well up there. And I'll be up there in a few days, so checking it out myself.
Well, Jamie, that's sort of what you think, though, right? You have an East Side store and a West Side store. A little bit different personalities.
I think it is. You know, I think the West Side store is going to see more action in the off season, and then the lounge that's there is going to be a unique and cool addition to the whole scene. So
I'm just all choked up about it.
I can tell.
Like have a musical and stuff, you know.
Yeah, I'm really happy for Russ. You know, this is his major project, and things are coming together. He's put together a good team, one step at a time.
Third location for Botanical Company. We have Lansing, and then we have East Tawas, rather, and now Kalkaska.
It's all true. And then the lounge coming up next, and of course Franklin Fields opened up this year, and then there's BioBiz, the processing, will be putting out products before the end of the year too. So the empire grows, and Russ and his brother and others have just done a really good thing in this industry, and I think set apart from some of the people that we kind of complain about quite a bit, and it's one of the reasons why I'm there.
Well, the Botanical Company certainly signed on to the hashtag No Changes pledge for businesses to encourage our lawmakers to not support any changes to the caregiver rules here in Michigan. So kudos to them for that.
And put out a statement saying we're not buying those things anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and then the other sponsors all doing great shit. Real Leaf Solutions up there in Kalkaska also. They're part of the lounge. There's an MICAA conference taking place up nearby up there in Bel Air pretty soon, and we'll all be hanging out in a few days for that. Redemption just had a merger with Driven Grow. They're growing. Things are looking really good there. Both those companies are awesome, run by awesome people. I see Tommy from Detroit Nutrient Company all over the place. He sells the soil all over the country, and he's got pictures from hanging out and doing some fun stuff all over the place lately. Grow Green, man, they're doing some great, huge deals. Go to Instagram and check out their page. It's like too much here to even talk about. Just they're doing all types of really cool shit. Who else do we have in there?
Really?
Detroit Nutrient Company, Grow Green. You had Redemption, Real Leaf Solutions, and BOCO. So
we talked about them all. All right, and everybody's awesome, and we got more coming too. And last week, in fact, Apothecary could be in that zone, although we liked them no matter what, and we had some fun time hanging out there and getting on the party bus last week. That was.
I might go up there tomorrow. I gotta see. I might head up there tomorrow.
I missed that. So mad I missed that.
Yeah, it was a great time. I also saw a post where they they pledged to take buses up to the Bridge Walk, which is sponsored by the United Caregivers Coalition this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right
Cool
on.
people. Anthony and Nicole, real cool people.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So, and then today we are going to talk about Judith some more. There's a rally for her, and then a subsequent township meeting on the 20th. Rally for her tomorrow, which is the 14th. That's at the county courthouse. It's down in Ann Arbor. People are showing up around 11. We'll talk about this a little bit more too. Their hearings about 1:30, and then there'll be an Ypsilanti Township meeting where some of the people who made this policy can be directly addressed. And her situation has been through the courts. It's exhausted, so it's being used mainly as a highlight to how stupid this policy is, where it gets to this point. And we're going to continue to do that. There seems to be a lot of support from our community, just from the people in the town where she lives, and from a lot of people who just hear about this. They're like, "What are you talking about?"
I'll just tell you that I saw an ordinance from another community which actually cited her case as one of the justifications for why it was okay to be able to restrict caregivers in their community. It sickens me that we have to listen to that people are using this poor woman as a justification for further restrictions.
That is fucked up. And in part, it's because there's this really, really bad Court of Appeals ruling that came out of this mess. I mean, I'll describe how we got there, or maybe her attorney Barton Morris will when he joins us at 4:30. But we'll talk about all that, and I just agree with that 100%. It's hanging out there. It's unpublished. It just has to do with her case, but it is fuel now because it exists as a high court ruling that people can point to.
This is all the politics of what we're going through. This is exactly what the Michigan Municipal League wanted to happen. They told communities that if they pass these things,
And the Townships Association, yeah.
correct. And they told these people if they pass these things and they had some court cases in their favor, it would be much easier to keep moving their ball forward. We've seen this coming for a long time. It's unfortunate it's starting to get a little traction, and I'm happy to see that people are willing to stand up against it. So.
It's all mine. It's cool. And it's outside of our community, as I said. So it's just people at large recognize this as being a stupid fucking situation.
Yeah.
So Senator Schumer in U.S. Congress is going to introduce a legalization bill pretty soon. And, it'll have some implications. And it includes descheduling. And depending on how that looks, it could have different implications. We're going to have an analyst on, an attorney who has expertise in commercial law and constitutional law, and who was the executive director of a organization called the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce. I don't have it in front of me. That was out of memory, so I think that's
that bill is getting introduced this week, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he and his organization do a lot of work in D.C. I've had a cool conversation with them as part of another conversation on this issue, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that what he had to say would be good for all of us to listen to and to ask him some questions and see what the implications are depending on how descheduling may go down and that kind of stuff. I thought was interesting. So we'll do that too. But up until we start getting these people on, I wanted to talk about the Hash Bash Cup, which was a great time this weekend, and just an amazing event. And we happen to have the guy who started it and facilitates it every year with us.
I'm just one of a few.
But you definitely like to take credit for it, so I'll offer that to you right now. And
I produced the event. I didn't
tell you thank you very much. No, I was around when it got started. I remember the history of it, but it turned into something that's quite special, and I had a great time this weekend, so I appreciate that. As I said last night on Medical Mondays, which was also a great show, and the family that had their kid taken away in Alabama for a little bit of pot were on there, and that was disheartening to listen to. We'll cover that at some point a little bit later too, but that was horrible to listen to. But as I said on Medical Mondays, the only one complaint I had about Hash Bash Cup was really loud in the room with music. It sounded good. It didn't distort it or anything like that. It remained sounding really good. It was just loud. That could be an old man talking. But outside of that, everything was a blast for me.
I think the sound guy figured out if we play loud music, people won't hang out too long. Keeps them moving.
Keeps everybody moving. Yeah.
Yeah. You can only hang out there's only so many tables sitting there you can sit at and smoke weed at. And they were pretty full most of the time.
So the plan is just damage people's hearing until they walk away bloody? All right.
That's what sound guys are known for. I mean,
That's the bash part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so people are already talking about the cops. It got overblown at one point. Just discuss the little incidents that took place and how
the cops were great. So
yeah.
Well, we can work backwards. So we'll work from the early morning. So there was a medical emergency in the morning. When you call 911 for a medical emergency, the police show up. So this smoking hot Ann Arbor police officer showed up with her partner, Jocko. Jocko, when Jocko's partner got out of the car, went absolutely nuts. The windows were rolled down. He was sitting out front in the car. Now, Jocko can't be a weed dog. We know that because this is Ann Arbor, and they had to get retrained dogs. So we're not sure why Jocko was going nuts, but people saw that. That was a little nutty. Anyways, that was a medical emergency. They came and went. No problems with the police. They were happy that we called them and whatnot. Later in the afternoon, an individual lost his keys, thought somebody had stolen them and was going to steal his car full of camera equipment. Instead of coming to our security, which is what you do at an event like this, he dialed 911. So I don't know if his idea was he was going to snitch on us or if he just needed the police to help him. But either way, we found out this was going on. And our security, of course, met the police at the front door, discussed what was going on. The individual was there. The officer said, "Please show me where this took place." At which point we escorted the officer into the building next to the pool. A few people saw the officer in the building and panic ensued. The officer was not in the building for more than 4 minutes. It was the funniest thing ever because most people had no idea she was in the building. Now, the reality was that somebody told somebody the cops are here. That somebody told 4 people, and the place just went nuts. I'm waiting to see the video from outdoors of the people running through the parking lot with bows in their hand, bags and bags of bows, all because the cops walked in, mind you, for the second time that day. Most of these people didn't know they were there earlier in the day. But to me, it's kind of comical because I've had a lot of interaction with the police. It's unfortunate it happened at my event and something I was involved in. But it's comical because at every event I've ever been at, when the police arrive, we walk them through the event. People look up, they see the producer of the event walking calmly with the police, and they know there's nothing to be concerned about. At Rainbow Farm, we used to, when the cops showed up, bring the hand drummers around, and they would follow the police, the hand drummers. And people would hear the drums, and they'd look up, and they'd see these cops and this crew walking at them, and they knew that if they had stuff out that maybe you didn't want to display, to cover it up. No harm, no foul. Well, these people, I mean, you hear there were all kinds of rumors. We were raided. This is Ann Arbor. What would they raid Ann Arbor? What would the Ann Arbor police possibly raid a weed event for in Ann Arbor? That just shows you how out of touch some of the people in our own community really are. I mean, to be honest with you. We had fire alarm went off at one point due to a error in judgment on some people, but fire department showed up, they left, no problem. We don't have those problems at that event. That we have a great security force. They're respectful. They treat people right.
They were, man. They actually facilitated stuff without much extra muss or fuss. It was.
I mean, they're trained the way I want them to be trained for my event. They know what I want. They've been
And
doing
they,
it.
and they
with
weren't
me for 40
carrying
years.
automatic weaponry on their back, which is kind of unnecessarily intimidating in some cases.
So I have a real issue where I have individuals that come to my event that want to bring their own private security. And I refuse to allow any security forces in my building other than my own, especially anybody that's wearing anything that says the word security. The reason being is that my security is there to help. If you go ask somebody a question and you think they're security and he sends you to somebody else because he doesn't know, I don't want that. That's not what I want. So I've refused to allow these other security teams who have shown up. And we have issues with them every year. But my guys are all professionals. And I'll actually make an admission that may surprise some people because you do know my hatred of badged police officers. It's visceral. But the leader of my team is a Dearborn Heights police officer. And he, without him, I couldn't do this event. He intercepted the county when the fire department came out, hearing, of course, that we were going to have our event there. They showed up a couple days before, and they were doing a random inspection. And somebody mentioned, one of the firefighters mentioned, well, we know you're doing this event. You know you can't have any smoking here. And the manager kind of played stupid because, of course, he told them it was a license. The manager said, no, I think they have a license. So the fire department mentioned to the health department that there was an event where they were going to allow smoking indoors. Now, the law in Michigan doesn't allow tobacco smoking indoors. It's very specific. And when that was pointed out to the woman at the health department, they called the event and spoke to my security guy. And he told them that, the law is specific to tobacco. We don't allow tobacco in the building. They have to smoke tobacco outside. That's all he said. And she said, can you give me the name of the producer, the name and number of the producer of the event? At which point he said, I don't have that information on me. It's in my paperwork, but they're on the contract, he said. But I can get that to you. Let me call you on Monday. So he, of course, calls me after the conversation to say, hey, I got to call the health department on Monday and turn you in. Which, of course, I thought was kind of comical because I know he's not going to do it. He says, well, he'll forget to make that call. So the interesting thing and why that story is important is the county health department and the city fire department have taken interest in this event. Those are local governmental agencies. This is not, the state has no interest. They haven't come, they don't care, they haven't contacted us. These local entities have no horse in this race. The health department's going to read the law and realize that as long as we don't allow tobacco in the event, they have no jurisdiction over the event.
Yeah, so when you hear about the smoking laws or whatever, that's typically just tobacco.
Correct.
A lot of people conflate them.
I tell people that if you want to understand the smoking law in Michigan, remember the sign you read in the elevator. Sign in the elevators always quote the law and the word tobacco's in there.
Right.
And everybody knows it because
I like the fact that New York's law allows smoking cannabis anywhere that tobacco can be smoked. That's right. A good one. Right. The problem is they've banned. The problem is they're still banning tobacco smoking from their city parks.
Right.
That makes I'm sorry. You can be as anti-tobacco as you want, and I am. I'm an asthmatic who grew up with a mother smoking in the front seat of the car with me sitting in the back seat. I don't like cigarettes. However, in a city park, clean up your butts. I don't mind.
Adam, so I think one of the things that your story reveals is that 3 times the Ann Arbor Police Department came to your event where there was open smoking and all kinds of transactions going on. And 3 times they said, thank you, have a nice day, enjoy your party, and left. That's
Well,
3 times we have proved that event is not on an illegal basis.
Truth
all
be
those people-
told, though, I mean, I'm not gonna. Truth be told, they never walked through the whole event.
Right. Wow.
They by the way, it's 420. They never walked through the whole event. So to say they might have seen something that might have caused them some concern, but I would have been happy to walk them through the event had they asked. And
I
they didn't ask.
I have a feeling that any police officer in Ann Arbor knows exactly what the Hash Bash Cup is about and what y'all do.
Okay, so my theory is this. Let me just throw this out there for everybody. I know they're there, and it's not the Ann Arbor police that's there. I know the state's there. I know the state police are there. I know that the MRA sent somebody there. I know the health department sent somebody. And I believe they use it as information drop. Right now we have licensees in the state. I guarantee you that there were people whose names were on licenses that were there vending. And I can only assume that the MRA is looking to see who those people are. And that's where they're going to ding some of these people. They're going to go after people that are easy pickings, people that violate the rules.
Man, if the license,
They're there.
I can just say, like, I've seen the process, been a part of it, been right next to it. Everything that goes into it, the limitations, all the components necessary to get that license. Not to mention all the resources and that kind of
Why
stuff.
would you risk it?
Why would you risk it?
To show up and to not know that is like
Oh, they
not even
know.
a consideration is
They know exactly what they're doing. You saw the alert that
to
came
know and still do it is.
Wait, but you
maybe
saw
even
the
worse.
alert that came out where they just suspended the one place for doing shady shit on camera, right?
So that's the same place that had the lick joints that got recalled, right?
Did they actually suspend suspend the license this time?
Yes. Like they're closed down.
Fourth
right now.
violation they've had, Jeez.
I mean, this is this, and hear me out.
Euclid
They
in
don't-
Bay City.
But hear me out. This is what happens when you create a system like this. When you create a system that has investigative officers, they need work. So they're going to investigate all these companies to see who's doing it right and who's not. And some guys are going to get busted and some won't. But there's all kinds. We know there's shady shit going on all over the place. And worse than that, it's not just the shady shit. What about the mistakes people make? If they're really looking, they're going to catch people that make mistakes. And hopefully they'll treat those people differently than they will the guys that are coming in the middle of the night with the duffel bags full of weed and sticking the duplicate metric stickers on. Okay. Right. I mean, this happens. And the reason it happens, and people don't understand this, there isn't somebody at the MRA watching a video screen of your shop.
Well, let's take a minute before we go on to our first guest today in a couple of minutes and talk about the great music and comedy you had there. That was a big part of the weekend for me. I saw some fantastic musicians, man. That was really nice to be able to see in that kind of a context, and that was a big part of the weekend for me. The very last band I watched, and by the way, we talked about this last night at Medical Mondays. There are many P-Funk All-Stars in varying bands that played throughout the weekend. Just as a
that was
trivia note. And if they are a P-Funk All-Star, they are no slouch. I mean, those are some of the best musicians.
We spread them out. Yeah. That I thought Count Funkula was the greatest thing I ever saw. I'm going to tell you the truth. Count Funkula was so good, I increased his pay and told him he had to work for me next year. Right on. He asked for a certain amount of money. He was doing a favor for the guy that books the bands for me on Saturday. And he said, hey, man, I'm working. I cut my rate. I'm working doing Tree a favor. And I said, I really appreciate that. Here's a little extra. We'd like to have you for the next one. He said, well, we can also bring the T-Funk or the other guys. All these guys are going to come. Right. We're going to try to put as many of these all-stars up on one stage at a time. We're going to reach out to Bootsy. We're going to reach out to George and just see what we can do. Because this is the type of shit that I love. So what was it? It was the first High Times Cup that was in Detroit. I forgot how many years ago that was now, but a lot of those guys got together and they had
12,
George
I think.
Stage. Yeah. In 12.
That was amazing to have another one of those, man. Of course, John did his spoken word, and with a classic band behind him. He had Jeff Grand on guitar. He had Tino Goss. Gross, yeah. And I don't know everybody else who was in it, but
Gross.
Chris Rummel plays bass.
Okay.
And before them, we had Harmonica Shaw and Howard Glazer.
Not a harmonica.
Yeah.
Harmonica Shaw came up and sat in with them.
Yeah, he was at the Peace Fest too a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Harmonica
Legendary.
We lost Bob Baldori. He had some surgery a week ago, and he wasn't going to make the gig. And I really like him on the gig because he brings his harmonica. So I reached out to, when we were at the gig in Detroit, I reached out to Harmonica Shaw and Glazer and asked them if they'd play, and they were happy to. So that was great. I was really happy about that. And of course, we had Laith El Sadi on Friday night, close it out.
You have Cosmic Knot on Sunday, I think, yeah?
Yes. Yeah,
and of course, Tom Wall walked around and handed out big, huge.
I got a huge chunk of that.
Purple nugs of the Cosmic Splooge.
Yeah, I got a huge Cosmic Splooge nug. And here's the thing. Here's what pisses me off. I booked Cosmic Knot for April 2 years, April of 20, and COVID killed that. I had him booked to premiere his playing with the plant publicly. He hadn't done it yet, and he was going to do the Sinclair thing. We were going to have Sinclair there, the whole thing. This was going to be huge with him. And then COVID happened, and because COVID happened, he then did it himself in his own little world.
He made his own video,
and he got a bunch of media exposure, and it's huge,
But it was cool, and that plant that he gave us was the plant that he jammed with, right?
Yeah, and for me, that was like to see that I could have been there. I missed it by fuck you, COVID. Anyways, I missed it by that much. But
you were wearing, it reminds me, you were wearing a fuck you Berg shirt.
When I interacted with the cops.
Interacted with the police, yeah.
Yeah, that happened at like 8:30 in the morning, and I was completely like not dressed and had to throw something on. It was the only shirt I could find.
So, anyway, we're about ready to wrap this up, but I think I remember you saying last night, now that things are supposedly getting back to normal, Hash Bash Couple resumed the regular Hash Bash weekend.
Yes,
but there might be
1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Maybe something going on in July from now on because this went down so well.
Yeah, we're looking at possibilities to do a July event.
Yeah.
Right on.
So I might do the Adam L. Brook Invitational Cup.
And then there's no question whose event it is. So when I say, thank you, Adam.
It's egomaniacs only. That will be our tag.
Hey, so let's
sign me up.
Right.
Anyway, I had a great time, man. And,
hey, I'm happy you guys did. I mean, it.
Oh, you know what? I just want to mention, like I said last night, one of the things as it occurred to me on like Saturday, halfway through the day, I'm at this event and I don't have any particular obligation whatsoever. I don't have to do anything, and that was a nice little epiphany.
Darren McCarty also enjoyed being there, just chilling out and not having any role. It's kind of fun.
I turned around. I was talking to Mr. Marcus, my doorman, and I turned around and he's walking through the door. And I didn't reach out to him because I didn't want to ask him to appear. I wasn't going to pay him to appear because my original plan was to bring a bunch of athletes in, Joel Zamaya, him, everybody. Well, this is July. I'll wait till April for that. So I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want him to think I wanted him there for his celebrity or anything. So I didn't reach out, knowing full well that he knows he could show up. And he did. And it was great. It was great having him.
It was pretty cool. And he did his classic, making everybody feel good who wanted to meet him and take pictures and sign his shit. Yeah.
Hugs and selfies.
Yeah. I saw a guy talk to him. He went and got a jersey, came back, and he signed the jersey. Right. I appreciate that because that guy's going to be thrilled that he went to the Hash Bash Cup.
It's a life memory.
It is.
Who's sitting at a table with everybody else.
Yeah.
Let's bring on our first guest.
He's a lot of fun.
Anyway, thanks again, Adam. Let's get into the Judith Pontius story a little bit more, and we'll talk about some other stuff too. But we happen to have attorney Barton Morris, Cannabis Legal Group, with us, who's on that case and many others, and we're happy he took the time to join us. Welcome, Barton. Thank you very much for joining us. Got the mute thing going. And when you unmute,
Barton, you're muted, my friend.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
There he is.
All right, I didn't realize that I should have brought my smoking apparatus, but I left it at home.
It's a
almost-
Tuesday. Why not?
You have to
It's
have
almost a
every
prerequisite just to get
location.
through this show, man. So
It's Tuesday.
If you're at the office, I'll stop by.
Oh, thank you.
So anyway, man, really happy to have you here. Thanks for taking out the time. And it's a little unfortunate the immediate reason that we want to talk, about what's going on in Ypsilanti Township a little bit, and what's going on tomorrow, and that type of thing. So most of us here know about the story of Judith Pontius, 79, but already turned 80. She's exceeding a plant count on a local ordinance, but staying within state law. And the township has really exercised all their options, and they've taken it all the way through the high courts and everything like that. And now it's a matter of like highlighting what a ridiculous result there is of this policy, in my opinion. But anyway, Barton, please take it away and give us your perspective on this and what's going on.
Okay. So we've had caregivers since 2008, the Medical Marijuana Act, and since that time until late last year, caregivers had been protected as they are sacred, as they should be. They're key to the program, and as caregivers, having that ability to be able to provide that medicine to their patients, it's something that is that should be protected. But unfortunately, a Michigan Supreme Court opinion took away some of that right and some of the ability to be protected. DeRuiter versus Township of Byron, decided by the Michigan Supreme Court late last year, gave municipalities the opportunity to zone caregivers. And what that means, because unfortunately a lot of these municipalities don't want caregivers in their cities, in their municipalities, and so like these townships, and it's given them the opportunity to really set forth some ordinances that are practically eliminating, restricting, zoning caregivers, and that's what's going on with Ypsilanti Township and Judith Pontius. So when I heard about it, when she contacted me and advised me as to what was going on, I knew it was something that this is just a continuation of what we're seeing as the erosion of caregiving rights. We see it with now the municipalities trying to get rid of them. We're seeing it with movements by large commercial manufacturers trying to get rid of them, seeing them as threats. Well, Judith Pontius is not a threat to anyone. She's not a threat to her neighbors. She's not a nuisance. She is just a really lovely 80-year-old woman who has a beautiful medical marijuana grow in her basement, and she simply just wants to be able to continue to do that, take care of her patients strictly and in compliance with the Medical Marijuana Act, and the township won't let her do it. And so I recognized immediately that this is a case that would get and has gotten a lot of attention and a lot of support. The amount of support actually that she has received has been absolutely tremendous. She is so pleased. It's unfortunate that she has to deal with what she's dealing with now, but she's very pleased about the support that she's been receiving because she really, really is interested in preserving and protecting the rights of caregivers. But unfortunately, tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 in the Washtenaw County Courthouse, we appear before Judge Carol Conkey because the Township of Ypsilanti unfortunately filed a motion to hold her in contempt of court because she won't get rid of her plants, or she hasn't. They allege gotten rid of her medical marijuana plants as a caregiver that she is growing within her home, and that's kind of what's going on.
How do we know that she hasn't gotten rid of the plants? I mean, do they want to do an inspection? Is that the issue now?
That is. On June 11th, Judge Conkey was forced to, because she was ordered to by the Court of Appeals in the Michigan Supreme Court. So she was forced to sign an order that prohibited Judith from having, from being a caregiver, from having the number of plants to be able to take care of her patients and to eliminate the number of plants for her patients. She's only permitted to have the plants for herself. But then also to have the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department come in and counter plants. And so we actually have that scheduled for tomorrow morning to be compliant with the court's order.
Barton, they ordered an inspection of her plants?
Yeah, an inspection to count the number of plants. Yes, the judge
Make
did.
sure she was following the order.
Yeah, but
How would they know would be my question.
That's part of the order. It was an order that was drafted by the attorneys for the township of Ypsilanti. So it's understandable. I mean, I get it. Townships, municipalities, they sometimes have problems with caregivers. Sometimes caregivers are growing more than they're supposed to. They're growing in conditions that may be unsafe, and they're growing in a manner that can cause an odor that might be offensive to neighbors, right? But not all caregivers are doing that. Just some, and perhaps I wouldn't even call them caregivers. A lot of people are simply just growing more marijuana than they're supposed to under the guise of being a caregiver. It's giving true caregivers a bad name. Judith is a true caregiver, somebody who is doing it strictly within the confines and the rule of law, of state law. She's not bothering anybody, particularly any of her neighbors. There's no offensive odor. There's no unsafe conditions. She's just a grandmother that's caring on behalf of her 4 patients and herself. And now the township, what they've done is said that you can't do that in a home. Well, where else is she going to do it? She's not going to. She can't afford to go in their industrial zone.
It's exclusionary. And Bart, when you say this is as a result of a DeRuyter, it is, but that's slightly misleading because it got sent back down to the Court of Appeals. They then made a really stupid ruling saying home occupation thing. Yeah, you can do that. And, and then that wasn't challenged itself. That to many of our opinions, that itself should have been challenged. So I don't think the Supreme Court meant that.
I agree. This was they try to make it seem as though that there's this other case what was the other case that it's similar to that one, but it's not. This is completely different. It could have been challenged and should have been challenged in order to distinguish that this is not the same as the other case. It's unfortunate.
But we're past that point, and here we are now. We're basically using this, I think, as you kind of pointed out, as a highlight to how ridiculous this policy is when applied to something like this.
Well, it's also brand new too, because caregivers were protected for many, many years, and we operated under the protection from the Supreme Court that said caregivers had to. Our law was to be respected because it was a voter-directed initiative. And then recently, this whole thing's flipped around. So they've reversed 10 years of good law in a heartbeat, isn't it?
And it's not resolved. And it's like another case could make its way up there. It might even come out of Ypsilanti Township, but she won because of Terbeek.
Yeah,
and then it got reversed
because of Terbeek, right? Terbeek was kind of the opposite. Where that municipality wanted to keep plants in a home, or no, I'm sorry, Terbeek wanted to eliminate caregivers completely, right? And that obviously was struck down. That was preempted by the Medical Marijuana Act. So now they're trying to say the city of Wyoming, that case where they were trying to keep it in residential zones, and they ruled that a municipality can zone caregivers. Well, this is the opposite, where they're trying to get it out of residential zones and putting it in industrial zones. And that is even more so oppressing, restricting, eliminating caregivers. I mean, that's the practical result, and that's what they want to do, is they're eliminating caregivers, which is precisely what is not supposed to happen. The Medical Marijuana Act provides for caregivers to be able to operate, and they're not. And the Supreme Court basically is giving these municipalities the opportunity to eliminate them.
Right. And let's talk about the real reason for this in some people's mind. It's not there's this concern over the odor. You said sometimes that is a thing, and that shows up and it's real. But in this particular case, I just want to point out a couple things. There was one complaint, and the response was not, hey, a code enforcer showing up to say you got 30 days to figure out how to get a ventilation system in here. It was 5 cops. 5 deputy sheriffs showed up at her house and then asked her if they could look at her plans. There's no warrant. They had no other reason. They just asked her. She said yes. And without that, we might not even be here right now.
They intimidated her with the numbers. And when you show up with that many cops and they make a request, very few people are going to have the fortitude to say no.
Well, she's been fighting it, and you got to give her like all the credit in the world. From the very beginning, they told her to get rid of it, and she said no. She did take care of the odor. There has never been a complaint since about it. And the township has been doing nothing but fighting her over and over and over again and losing. At trial court they lost, at the Court of Appeals that they lost, and they continued to fight it. Even though she's fixed all problems, they could have given it up. They could have gone to her and asked her to make sure that that she's okay, but they didn't. They continued to fight, and they won. And now they're not even.
Yeah, they won.
What's really interesting. They when I got involved, the first thing I did was contact this township attorneys, right? I contacted them. I said, look, let's try to come to some type of resolution where we don't have to go to court, where we can maybe, address and talk about perhaps changing the ordinance to go ahead and look after what this municipality may be interested in, but also at the same time while preserving and protecting the rights of caregivers, specifically the ones like Judith. They refused to talk to me, and instead they filed this motion to hold her in contempt of court. And then they actually asked for, and this is, I think, it's actually amazing. They asked for money to be sanctioned. They want us to be sanctioned because we forced them to come to court. This is a perfect example of how unreasonable they are.
So it's not about the odor. This is using a tool to try to stop people from growing in their township.
This case appears to be about the ego of this township attorney. She specifically told us that he hates to lose and he doesn't give up.
And he uses the township money. So what does he care?
Right. And I mean, I'm shocked that this guy has been in the job as long as he has, and that the people know what he does. It's not. She's not in any way, shape, or form violating the ordinance at this point, to their knowledge. They have to send somebody in to find out.
And Joe Sullivan.
What's the issue?
Joe Sullivan points something out that I was going to say also. At the last meeting where many of us attended, her neighbor did show up and tell everybody that he never smelled anything at any point from over there. So I don't think it's not about this. It's not about the odor. It's about just trying to being able to limit activity and use it as a vehicle.
So Judith has a court date coming up. Could you tell our listeners exactly where and when they can appear to support her for that?
The court hearing is in Washtenaw County Circuit Court, which is located at 101 East Huron in downtown Ann Arbor. It's Judge Carol Kunke, and it's at 1:30. Now, I understand that there are going to be people showing up at 1, perhaps organizing a protest, being outside of the courthouse at 1 p.m., which I am not encouraging, but I think it's fantastic. The reason I say that is because a lot of people are saying, well, they want what we want. What I want is what's in the best interest of my client. There is a court order that orders her to do something, and I'm trying to be compliant with that court order. I'm not trying to appease in court anyway, to appease the protesters and fight for caregiver rights while we're in court. I have to represent my client. I have to do what's in her best interest, and what I think is in her best interest is to try to comply with the court's order, which is what we're doing. We're having the plants counted tomorrow, and we're recharacterizing the plants. We're not getting rid of all of them, but they're going to be Judith's personal plants, and I believe that there's nothing that the township can do when we characterize those as her personal, either medical or recreational.
Yeah, and that makes sense because she knows she's going to be shutting down her garden in September, and so she needs to make sure that she can take care of her own supply for as long as she needs. Right.
That's right. And there's nothing that the townships can do about that. So once we prevail in court, what's great is that this conversation is still going to continue, and we're still hopefully going to talk about and continue to do something about how municipalities are doing everything they can to prosecute and to eliminate and restrict and zone caregivers, really to just get rid of them, because that's what they're, at least this particular township, that's what they're trying to do. And really we need some assistance either from the state legislature. We need to do something to keep them from doing it. Obviously, the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court's not going to help at this point. Or we need the township to understand and recognize that what they are doing is simply not the will of the people. It's not the will of the people of Ypsilanti. They're doing their own will. There's people that are elected. They're elected by the people that live in that township. And there's a lot of people that live in that township, more than in the city of Ypsilanti, from what I understand, that voted overwhelmingly in favor of recreational marijuana. And I would imagine medical marijuana as well. They don't want Judith Pontius, who's again doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. They don't want her being subjected to this, nor anybody else.
Her case dates back to 2016. Let's just let our viewers and our listeners know this is 5 years ago. This is a township that had many opportunities to just let this go and chose not to, and chose instead to be brutal about it, to be vindictive, to be vengeful. Wouldn't you characterize it as such?
Absolutely. Like I said, they wouldn't even pick up the phone to talk to me. Instead, file a motion to hold an 80-year-old woman in contempt of court. That is exactly what they wanted to do. They refused to even. I still haven't talked to them over the phone. I still don't even know what their voices sound like.
I see this as
despite the fact that I've tried to talk to them. The moment that I got this case, the first thing I did was contact them, and they refused to speak to me.
I see these people as grievable, and you know what that means, counselor. I would punch these guys' tickets in a minute based on the behavior I've read that this man has done over the years, let alone to this little old lady now. Come on. And he's going to lose. He knows he's going to lose because the future's the future. It's not the past he's living in.
Let me also mention that in their pleading that they filed in court, they identified the people that accompanied Judy to the township board meeting on July 6th. I believe many of you were there. They referred to you as goons, Judith's goons, because they believe that these people are trying to, the people that accompanied her and the people that are going to show up on July 20th are going to act as though that they are not supposed to be there, or that they're going to act in a manner that's not orderly. That's not what's going to happen. They're going to exercise their right to speak at a public body meeting where everybody has the right, according to their own rules, to speak to them for a minute, from 3 minutes. And I would imagine at some point they're going to stop the number of people that want to speak. But I would imagine that the message is going to be loud and clear, and I very much look forward to it.
We were told by 2 trustees that if 100 people show up, 100 people will get their 3 minutes.
Yeah, but Judith's goon.
I like the fact that I'm referred to as a goon. I'll be there tomorrow.
Hey, can I clarify something on my side? I'm wondering, you said that the police showed up at her door, and like somebody called and said that there was a complaint earlier. Is that how that all began, the smell? And then she corrected that, and that was the beginning of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they bypassed the odor issue, went right to violation of the ordinance and started hammering on that.
Right.
And Carol,
Well, how did they even know she had that many plants? I don't know.
She let them in.
She let them in.
Oh, okay.
She got rid of the
because she was following state law, unaware of the more
Right.
restrictive local ordinance.
Same thing as all those guys that got busted in 2008, 2009, because they all thought they were following the law.
Yeah, but
I mean, we're talking
She
about
was.
people like worried about people at the courthouse.
I know
who are
I'm following the
like
law, but I'm not letting them in my front door.
being disorderly. But I mean, isn't the fact that Ypsilanti Township is disorderly in accusing this woman of following the law?
Well,
I mean,
that's not. They're not worried about the court. It's the township meeting that they're afraid. See,
And
the problem is nobody.
how long has it been since she dialed down her grow and is only growing for herself now? Is that
Since she got busted, she said she did it right away.
so? That's been like 5 or 6 years. That's incredibly like.
She's recently even dialed it down even more. In an effort to try to be compliant with the court's order, she has now cut back even more.
She just has the plants now
So
that
what's
she
the
needs
beef
for
then?
her
I
own
don't
and
understand.
uninterrupted supply, which
When
is
we were at-
allowable.
When we were at Township Hall and talked to Judith, she was
Which
so
is
concerned about her
allowable.
patients. She was only concerned about her patients. She just wanted to be able to finish out their cycle so they could find new people to grow plants for them, and there was no interruption in the flow of their medicine. That's what kind of a godsend this woman is to the sick people that she takes care of. And this is what the township chooses to do to her.
Well, these township people are obviously ignorant to cannabis. We know that.
Yeah.
And
Or to
that's why it's
humanity.
important for people
You know,
to
I will
show
tell
up
you,
and explain it to them.
I think it's even worse than that. The supervisor has higher political aspirations and believes that this type of stuff is actually a positive.
But she's no
We've
longer.
seen-
in
we've seen that
violation,
before.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I can see that.
What's that, Deborah?
Miles Jr. thought
She's
that.
no longer. No, I was
Sorry,
saying,
go
is
ahead,
she
Deb.
no longer in violation? If they come in and count her plants, she's got legally what she can have right now. So what's
Yes.
the problem then?
Well, the
They're
problem, first of all, they filed this motion shortly after I got
It's for
involved.
past action, right? Yeah, so
Right.
it's for
Because
past
at the-
action. Right now,
at the
she's
time-
compliant.
The order was filed on June 11th, and it gave her 10 days to have the inspection, and she hadn't gotten the inspection. So we're having the inspection tomorrow. When we walk into court, that inspection will have been accomplished. They will have counted the plants. She will then assert, we will assert that the number of plants that are there, however many that are there, they're her personal plants. They're no longer characterized as her patient's plants,
Right.
and she will be compliant with the order.
Does she have any recourse
it's
to be
just
able to
setting a
sue after
precedent.
this is all done?
Recourse to what?
Just sue the township. Sue the township for denying her freedoms.
Perhaps. I mean, that could be a cause of action. The township has passed an ordinance to restrict and deny her rights that are granted to her under the Medical Marijuana Act. That could be a cause of action. I mean, it's something that we may contemplate, but ultimately that's for a judge to decide. It's not going to help much that the Supreme Court in DeRuyter has ruled in that fashion, but they didn't rule that there wasn't a cause of action. They simply ruled that this ordinance was permissible. It wasn't preempted by the Medical Marijuana Act. That's a different cause of action, what you're suggesting, and I think that's worthy of consideration.
Barton, one of the things we've talked about frequently about DeRuyter is that they agreed that it's possible for municipalities to zone and regulate caregivers, but they didn't outline what was acceptable zoning and regulation and what was impermissible zoning and regulation. And cases like this really are the way that we learn where the lines are, right? Does this case actually help us paint finer lines, or does it create more ambiguity in your mind?
The township's ordinance, does it create more ambiguity as it relates to the DeRuyter opinion? I think that it's more ambiguity. I mean, because you're right, there are many different ways municipalities can go about zoning. This is one way that I've encountered amongst many. There's some municipalities that are going way overboard. They're not even permitting it industrial zones, right? They're saying that it's a secondary, like they won't even have an ordinance that even talks about it, and then they interpret it to say that it's not permitted in homes other than more than the 12 plants that they're doing, because it's not a primary use, and they don't even have any ordinance whatsoever. And then they're basically again eliminating it, and then they're using DeRuyter to authorize it. So municipalities are going about it all these different ways, and none of them really have been challenged because they're all just using DeRuyter as this, catch-all overall case that they think that they're all safe on, and that's just not the case. There's going to be an articulation and an interpretation by the appellate courts as to all these different ways that they're trying to go about it.
We've seen many municipalities using DeRuyter and now the Pontius case also to justify these ordinances. We got Flushing Township, Vienna Township up here in Genesee County, Macomb County, Jackson County, all over the place. it's really the worst thing to happen to caregivers in 10 years.
That's right. It's unbelievable too, right? I mean, like this is the hypocrisy that this case has created. We have decriminalized marijuana. We have once and for all said that there's no way that anybody should ever even contemplate the fact of going to jail, the potential for going to jail. So no longer now have police that are threatening people to go to jail. We have municipalities doing it, municipal officials and township attorneys that are trying to put people in jail. That is what this offense, or that's what this motion is about tomorrow. They're literally saying, you know what, she violated this court order because she refuses to do what we say, so therefore a judge put her in jail. That should be absolutely like just incomprehensible. The fact that somebody can go to jail, regardless of whether it's an 80-year-old woman or an 18-year-old person or a 20-year-old person. The jail is literally like it's offensive. It's so offensive to me as an individual, as a defense attorney that has been fighting for so long to keep people out of jail and still trying to keep people out of jail, people that are still in jail at this moment and this day for nonviolent marijuana related offenses. The fact that like now I'm going back to court again and having to literally like talk about why somebody shouldn't go to jail, to me is blowing my mind.
Now, excuse me, what's Ellie Savitt doing?
I was about ready to say that, Jim, because for clarity, this is a court order that's being violated, and I don't think that the prosecutor's office would necessarily weigh in if the judge says, you need to go do that, and sends out people to enforce it to happen. Is the prosecutor's office involved in that type of situation, Barton?
For our listeners, Ellie is the prosecutor in Washtenaw County.
Yeah.
Right, and they have nothing to do with this case. They're not a party to this case. I wish they were, because we know that they would support us, but they're not a party to the case. Now we have McLean and Winters as the prosecutors, acting as though they're the county prosecutors. Why would the sheriff enforce this? The sheriff's not enforcing it. The sheriff's not doing anything. In fact, when I contacted them about this inspection, they first of all, they kind of giggled and like they said, oh yeah, the one deputy that I talked to about it, she's like, yeah, I saw this on the news. She's like, I was hoping that I wouldn't have to be involved in this, but we'll do what we have to do. And they're not. I mean, I'm not counting. They're not at fault at all. They're just going to come. They're going to count. They don't take an opinion as to whether the number is right or wrong. They're simply just coming to follow the court's order. One thing that I can be very grateful for is this. I don't know if you guys know Judge Carol Conkey. I do. I've been going in front of her in criminal cases for quite some time, and she is an amazing judge. She's liberal. She gives people second and third chances. I have cases where clients that have just done really bad things with regard to drugs and alcohol, drunken driving and stuff, and she gives them every chance in the world in order to rehabilitate. I've seen it. I've seen it happen with not only my cases but with others. I know that I can tell by the way that the order was written. I just don't think that she wanted to do what she has to do, but she has to do it. But now she has the right to do what she wants as it relates to the arguments that are going to be presented before her tomorrow, as with regard to whether that we violated the court order, and even if we did violate the court order, it's completely within her discretion to do what she believes is right, and I trust that she will. And I'm very encouraged, very pleased that I'm not walking into a courtroom where we have a judge who sometimes acts as though that they're a prosecutor.
Barton, I'm sorry. I don't know how much time you've got available, but I'd love it if you talked a little bit about Rudi Gammo's case, and if you could give us an update.
Yes. All right. So just a little background. Rudi Gammo was sentenced to. Rudi Gammo operated the first municipally licensed dispensary in the city of Detroit. I have the license. We got it. I helped him get it. It says 0001 on it, the municipal license that he got in the city of Detroit back in 2013 or 14. He has never, in that dispensary, Green Cross, never sold any marijuana to anybody other than a registered marijuana patient. Never any other drugs involved, not completely nonviolent. But because the DEA wanted to prosecute him, and they found somebody in the Oakland County Prosecutor's office to do it because he had caregiving grows that were supplying it that were in Oakland County. They prosecuted him. I defended him, and unfortunately, he was eventually sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. And that was under the old prosecutor, Jessica Cooper. Well, we got a new prosecutor this year, Karen MacDonald, and she came through with what she promised me when I supported her for her election. She said she would not only just not prosecute any marijuana cases, but assist in the release of anybody that's serving time now for a marijuana case, and that's Rudi Gammo. So we filed a motion for relief from judgment, and Karen came through, and her office not only didn't object to the relief, which is to get him out immediately. He's now been in for 3 years with that 5.5 year sentence, almost 3 years, I think. She has, and her office has championed this and has done everything I think that they could do in order to ask the judge to grant that relief. So we go into court and we go in to see that judge, and we tell that, and as a unified front, we tell that judge that, that what he shouldn't be in jail anymore. And so right now we're simply just waiting for that judge to make his decision. It's been 8 weeks now. It's been about 4 weeks since we actually had a court date. Unfortunately, the judge still hasn't made his decision. He did say in court that he recognizes the importance of this case, the fact that Rudi Gammo has a family, and unfortunately one of his children has leukemia, and they desperately need his support and presence in the home, and we're waiting for a favorable decision by Judge Jeffrey Mattis in Oakland County Circuit Court.
Barton, if people want to, we authored a letter through the Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition to support Rudi's release. If people listening to this broadcast want to support Rudi's release by writing a letter, what would be the best place for them to do that to?
Yes, I certainly encourage letters quickly too, because this judge, every day we were thinking we might hear something. I was hoping to hear something by the end of this week. We got a letter in that was very well drafted by myself and Rick, and anybody wanting to support it, please deliver a letter to Honorable Jeffrey Mattis, Mattis, who is an Oakland County Circuit Court judge. The address is 1200 North Telegraph in Pontiac, 48341, and voice your support for Rudi Gammo. Again, he is a individual serving time right now for a completely non-violent, completely only marijuana-related offense, particularly an offense where he was licensed to do it, municipally licensed to do it, at a time where there wasn't even a state license available, and which now that same facility is state licensed, and it is operating under a state license. But at the time, there wasn't a state license available. We hadn't even been able to get one yet. And unfortunately,
Oakland County doing their thing.
Oakland County, which has always been now obviously things are different in Oakland County, but for a very long time under the rule of Jessica Cooper and Beth Hand, who was the chief of the narcotics division. She was the one that authorized these warrants against Rudi. We fought her every step of the way, and even received the deviation because he was really looking at much more than 5.5 years. But ultimately he was breaking the state law, even though permitted by the city of Detroit, permitted by the county of Wayne, not by Oakland County, unfortunately. And they came after him and they got him. But God bless Karen MacDonald in the prosecutor's office there now, because and not only just that case, we have seen such a huge change in policy at Oakland County now. I'm proud to live here again, and I'm proud to have prosecutors that have the discretion to do what's right and what they believe is right. There's not this kind of like Washtenaw County, like we have prosecutors now that are really care about what they're doing and about what's just and what's right, and forgetting about like draconian drug laws and the drug war.
Nice.
Well, Karen MacDonald was one of those candidates that we championed as part of the cannabis community to help get elected. And this wasn't a primary election because both she and Jessica Cooper were Democrats. Primary elections are notoriously difficult to recruit people to support. But we were able to get her elected, and it was significant. As you mentioned,
get Cooper out because she sucks.
Right.
Yep.
And she came through with what she promised. That's
you guys, we do need to. Yeah, she has delivered, and so has Ellie, that's cool. And then of course in
promise and never deliver.
In Ingham County, we've got Carol Seaman too. So like it's hopefully we can keep that kind of momentum going.
That's the Attorney General.
That'd be cool.
Sure. Yeah.
We do have to wrap up this segment, and Barton, we're going to start getting into a conversation about federal descheduling and implications and what that may look like and that type of thing. So if you have any thoughts on that to help segue us into that discussion, and then of course anything else you'd like to leave us with, any contact information, anything you'd like to point people to, please feel free.
Yeah, so thank you. Of course, people can reach me in my office at cannabislegalgroup.com. That's the name of my law firm, cannabislegalgroup.com, for anything, criminal defense, but mostly we assist people in getting licensed, and I'm helping Judy for free. Like I'm fighting for her for free because this is what's happening is such a it's just a miscarriage of justice. And there's another miscarriage of justice which is going on at the federal level, and that's another issue that's really important to me. I've done lots of lobbying at the federal level with the National Cannabis Industry Association, particularly when I was on the policy council there. And what we're seeing now is that there's still a kind of gridlock. We still see the Senate, even though it's a slight majority Democratic, we still see Republicans being able to exercise enough will to keep legislation from being passed. I know that there is going to be a significantly large reform bill that's going to be introduced by Cory Booker and Schumer. We're looking forward to that, and there's got a lot of work to be done. I just hope that the votes are there, but there has to be some federal cannabis reform. Specifically, there's huge issues still related to banking, financial institutions. They're simply just not serving the cannabis industry to any degree close to where it should be, and to permit the industry to grow and flourish. There's hypocrisy with regard to prosecutions. Every state. I just read an article recently where a person from Michigan was driving through South Carolina and Tennessee with a child, and because there was marijuana in the trunk, a police officer found marijuana in the trunk, a small amount. They took the child because they called it child endangerment. Because in that state, this was in Tennessee. That was a felony. And they took the child and they arrested the parents, and they ended up staying in Tennessee and not even where they were from, simply just to continue to fight now against their felony charges and trying to get their 18-month-old child back. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, now we're in Michigan, and we're like sitting here, thankfully we've decriminalized marijuana. We know that nothing like that can happen here. But look at all the other states.
Bergen Roach had the family on their show last night. I was on there with Adam, and it is really rough. The judge down there did order it to come back to Michigan, and the only reason it hasn't gotten here yet is because that judge has not signed the order. So it's 3 months in. Yeah, it's a scheme. When they were describing this, every lie and little bullshit thing to get further into the investigation stuff, it was just so obvious as she was describing this.
Wow. And the CPS in Michigan still uses marijuana against parents. They did in my case.
Is that right?
Oh, sure. They use it as a reason to investigate, make sure that your children don't have access. I had a case totally unrelated to marijuana in my house, and they made me put a lock on my door before they would return my children to me. After they stretched the process out, it took another week.
Yeah, and they doing that with alcohol, by the way?
No.
Like people, the beer in the refrigerator or like in a liquor cabinet. For whatever reason.
There's no logic in the drug war.
We're gonna transition into our next topic, though. We have a couple of guests waiting here, and so Barton, please, where can people again, get in touch with you and anything else you want to wrap up with.
Cannabis Legal Group.
Yeah, cannabislegalgroup.com. And again, I highly support everybody that wants to support Judith Pontius. You know, like she's so, I talk to her every day. She is so much like, she's a little scared right now, but she's so like encouraged by all of the support that she's received. And you know, I am as well. So I'm going to fight for her. We're going to prevail tomorrow. And then let's just continue this conversation to ensure that we put pressure on these municipalities and the Michigan legislature to do what's necessary to prevent this from happening again, and to continue to fight for the rights of caregivers.
Right on.
Thank you for your work, Barton. Not just in these cases, but for over the years. We've been doing this for a long time, and you've been a stalwart advocate. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate that.
Right.
Hey,
I'm going to go actually prepare for my hearing tomorrow. So, you guys, thank you again for having me.
hey, Barton, before you go, let me introduce you to our next guest here. We have Alan Meyer and Rez Kahn, DNA Genetics and the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce.
Hey,
Nice to
everybody.
meet you guys.
Thank you for having us, Jamie.
All right. Thanks a lot, Barton.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for joining us, man. I appreciate the two for here. I know for sure Randall was going to come on and we had a conversation not too long ago and brought up what federal descheduling could look like, what the implications could be, how it's going to go down. Now we have a bill that's getting introduced by Schumer and Booker and some other, I guess, considerations of what that would look like. Last time around, I think there was a couple different approaches. One was just descheduling, period. Let the chips fall where they may, let the states fend for themselves with their own policy. And then another was along with kind of a federal program and over something to raise some revenue and all this other stuff, the MORE Act. And a couple of us have spoken for a while about, and I'll introduce you guys a little bit more, but let me set the stage here a little bit. I've spoken about, should we just want descheduling and then let us figure this out? Or do we have to have, this extra component of some type of federal oversight? And I know that like ASA, for example, has suggested that descheduling and then taking the issue out of the hands of the DEA and putting it into a newly created department, that would be, the idea anyway would be that it would be rational and sensible about it, and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'll talk a little bit more about what's going on too, but I really want to introduce Alan Meyer and Rez Kahn. Rez has been in the news lately with us because of DNA Genetics being an affiliate of SkyMint and being included in on the scrutiny and the boycotting and that kind of stuff. He came on to Medical Mondays, said, I agree with you guys, not them. And let's do some stuff. And last night on Medical Mondays, people were asking what's happened since then. And I was able to report, that you've been very proactive. You're gathering a lot of information on what's going on. The session comes back in September.
All your companies signed on to the no changes pledge from businesses. Yeah. So that's awesome.
And you're willing to publicly be in contradiction with the company you have a contractual agreement with.
It's even bigger than that, because that public contradiction just shows, how important it is, even in the face of, a partnership with the company that's taken, the absolute opposite position, and we're willing to fight them on it very publicly. And we're going to continue to send that message through our lobbying efforts, through our support of the right organizations that are sending the right message, consistent with the message that we're pushing not only at the state level, in every state, to be frank, but then at the federal level as well. So we hold strong to a core set of ideals that happen to be very in line with what the people of Michigan have been fighting for, and I think I couldn't, I know I couldn't be happier to join you guys today, and really appreciate you guys having us on. Randall and I were discussing earlier, the timing couldn't have been more perfect for us to come on and discuss federal policy.
Right.
when the federal policy framework that they are trying to push through is just been released or being released. So perfect timing, guys, and love to have the conversation on this forum.
Yeah, right on. I'd like to hear about that. What you've been, and the organization too, a little bit more about what the organization's about, and that's the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce, in which Rez is the president, Randall's executive director. And Randall, you are a lawyer. You have experience and knowledge in commercial law, and when we talked about this before, you had a lot to say about it, and I thought it was really interesting, and I thought you guys obviously were aware and as on top of this as anybody I've spoken to, and I think maybe we can all learn a little bit here today. So, anything else you need to say about yourself? But let's get into the conversation.
Well, Jamie, thank you for that introduction. I think that covers me perfectly, and yeah, I'm happy to jump into some of the complex policy issues that come around with deschedulizing and legalizing cannabis, and frankly, some of what we learned recently from what the hemp industry has been going through, with how they're dealing with CBD, the FDA, and those federal agencies are problematic for trying to get products to market, and making sure that you're having continued consumer access and confidence. So, with that, would you like me to kind of just tee up the policy differences between clean descheduling and what we advocate for as GACC?
Yeah, that, and then we should talk about what's actually on the table, and what that could or would look like, and what's happening in Washington, D.C. to let us think that it's going to advance or not advance and that type of thing. So, but please, yeah, give us that outline.
Absolutely. So, just to answer kind of that first question, but there, the clean descheduling versus having a regulatory framework. Right now in the United States, there are actually approved cannabis medications. Epidiolex is a CBD approved medication. Marinol is a THC approved medication that's been approved for almost 30 years, I think, roughly at this point, under the FDA, and has been administered before. Now, because there are approved drugs, those two products, the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act kicks in behind the Controlled Substances Act. So, we have all this regulatory issue and criminal issue really with scheduling status when it comes to Schedule 1 and the regulatory questions of Schedules 2 through 5 for legal products. When you're looking at the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act in the area of descheduling, you end up in the Wild West, similar to how hemp ends up with CBD products. And now what we've seen is that the FDA has taken multiple years, still not yet to come to a conclusion on how to regulate the trade of CBD products. And that's caused a lot of headaches for dealing with whether DEA or FDA is the regulator for those products, who's going to be dealing with what testing samples, whether or not the risk of running a hemp crop is sufficient for a risk for a small business farmer to want to take advantage of. And those uncertainties and those questions are what kill small business and medium-sized businesses. It's not the giant corporations that have legal teams and legal departments and legal contractors on top of their chief legal officer that are the ones that are going to have a trouble answering the regulatory agencies or have the extreme cost that affects overhead, answering those regulatory questions that are left unanswered. So the more specificity we have that provides clarity for businesses in governing legislation, the better it is for everyone to orient and to be able to operate in the marketplace. So descheduling, clean descheduling on its own is a policy that's worthy of consideration. Descheduling without a regulatory infrastructure, though, is very, very difficult for businesses and doesn't fully remove cannabis from something that can have a criminal penalty. There are criminal provisions in the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act. You can be charged with a criminal offense for sending an adulterated product in interstate commerce or an adulterated food. I'll pause there.
Well, Randall, there's just two things you said that I have to take a little bit of an issue with. You said that the current situation would disadvantage small and medium-sized businesses in the CBD trade. We see an explosion of small and medium-sized businesses in the CBD trade as it is right now. Secondly, too, more regulation doesn't always beget a better commercial environment. When you're saying, we need more regulation so the business has good parameters to work with, I think deregulation of businesses is on the mind of many people, and having a loosely organized regulatory framework would be more consistent with a national scheme where you have so many different states which all have divergent programs already in existence.
Oh, yes. And if I was unclear, there's a difference between clear regulations and a lot of regulations. We don't need a substantial number of federal regulations dictating every aspect of the facility, down to what size of a sandwich an employee can have at lunch, like the airlines were dictated to in the 80s. That is not efficient for small and medium-sized businesses. In fact, federally, the Regulatory Flexibility Act specifically exempts small businesses from heavy compliance regulations to make sure that they don't have that exact burden. And that's one of those protections that currently doesn't exist for small businesses with respect to complying for a lot of those issues, for dealing with state regulatory policy in terms of redress. So yes, you're completely right. It is important to maintain low barriers to entry. It's important to make sure that people can get licenses easily. It's important to make sure that there aren't regulations that are too costly to comply with from a legal perspective. But if we leave too much ambiguity in the regulation, if you leave too much openness in terms of how things get interpreted, that provides a lot of opportunity for special interest groups to take advantage of those and put in the exact barriers to entry that you and I think shouldn't exist.
And
So,
Rick, I want one thing real quick. Not only are you right, but to be even more clear, and this is going to be one of those moments where I peel back the onion a little bit. Maybe, people will get pissed off that I do, but part of this is being realistic and pragmatic about how we move the ball forward. And what that looks like. Now, there are many people who have always been very concerned about opening up a vacuum where we haven't quite worked out what a sensible regulatory framework looks like. Like Randall said, not necessarily over-regulation, but something. Because with the absence of something, there aren't willing to let us move that ball forward. And the true, addressing the injustices of cannabis prohibition over the last 80 years and a lot of the fixes that, quite frankly, we're not going to get without a broader federal descheduling and legalization. There are almost more questions that you create when you start to move the conversation forward. And if you don't have an answer, it's open season on the absolutely worst iteration of a regulatory framework being put in place. And we've seen this before in other markets where they have created that vacuum and it's only filled by over-regulation, right? So part of it is beating people to the chase and putting something in place that pulls on already existing harmonies between FDA, between TTB, between the various aspects or landmines, so to speak, as Randall had mentioned earlier, with issues that aren't immediately apparent to people that aren't digging through the weeds, the attorneys, on how this would actually work, right? And also providing for the state autonomy to be able to run their divergent programs. Whether you're an Oklahoma that has a free and open market, or whether you're a Texas that still wants to hold the line and very, in a very slow manner roll out a very limited medical program, that conversation can't disrupt those divergent approaches to, local DEI efforts, medical programs, and everything else. But it's got to provide for, banking, filing of intellectual properties at the USPTO, expungement of crimes, getting people, like all of the things that we have to unravel. And so I think
but Rez, it doesn't, though. I mean, you're saying it has to, but it doesn't. We could just simply deschedule without any additional regulatory framework and let each individual state continue forward as they have been right now without any of those changes additionally on a federal level. And that could happen immediately while a slower process of federal regulatory framework is being constructed. We don't really need to have all of those things in one big bite. We can take it in several steps, but the first step has to be decriminalization on the federal level, with or without regulatory framework, and I'd suggest without.
But when I had this conversation before, though,
they won't give us that. We've been asking for years. I know you have been too, and a bunch of people that have been fighting this fight. I
think John Young's introduced that bill for 10 years as a Republican from Alaska.
It certainly is unrealistic to expect the federal government to have in their clutches a gem, a money-making jewel, and for them to say, no, let's just let the people have it. But that is, of course, our ideal circumstance.
If that were to happen, though,
it may not be very realistic, though.
One of the questions that we've had, and to be clear on, Now, this is just theoretically. Well, then we'll get back to what's actually on the table, maybe, and what might be possible. If it were just descheduled, that's it, no other further oversight by the federal government, do the dominoes completely fall, or do the policies that are in each existing state remain in force?
The policies in each existing state remain in force to the extent that they do not conflict with the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act is the problem. So the way we describe this is the frying pan and fire problem. If you get out of the Controlled Substances Act fire, you're jumping immediately into the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act's fire, because everything that's labeled in products says something about the experience of cannabis. Like the vast majority of products that you see on the shelf in the store say something about what you can expect from the marijuana. Euphoria, something about calm, something about relaxation, something about enjoyability. And all of those are considered medical claims by the FDA. All those have to be evaluated scientifically to their specificity,
To be clear,
depending on how it's regulated.
it's not just the messaging on packaging, it's the claims that have been made in all of these markets that have already
That's
existed.
what tripped up CBD.
But you
Right.
can do it like an herbal
It's
supplement or something, then to avoid that, right?
backdrop. The FDCA is sitting there lurking like some sort of mugger in an alleyway waiting for someone to come by just as descheduling rolls through. It's
Three-piece suit wearing mugger with a briefcase he's going to pummel you with.
Yeah, exactly. Here's your civil injunction.
Yeah. I'm not going to take anything from you. I'm going to give you a writ. Yes. Exactly.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Doesn't that threat currently exist, though? I mean, the people who are currently violating the laws are still violating the laws, and we've seen some actions being taken under the Cosmetics Act, have we not?
Oh, yes, but this is where this gets really interesting. Right now, the authority to enforce the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act and the Controlled Substances Act criminally rests with the Department of Justice and the DEA specifically within the Department of Justice. And that's defunded right now from being able to do that with respect to cannabis. So as long as Rohrabacher-Blumenauer, that appropriations amendment stays in place and DEA remains the authority for dealing with cannabis, it's extremely limited what FDA's reach would be to cannabis, how far they're willing to go, what funds they can even use to go after it. So there's this kind of rat's nest of things interconnecting why we're in the status quo. And this is
So
why
the DEA can't come after us, but the cosmetics
What about-
regulators could then, if
What about presenting it like an herbal supplement, not FDA approved?
and the tax man could come too.
Well, we know that ring is on the doorbell. It's coming.
I'm sorry, Jamie, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're having a little fun with Rick. I should have stepped back. What about presenting it as an herbal supplement, not FDA approved?
Even in herbal supplements and FDA pathway. So we're talking about using the dietary supplement pathway under the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act instead of the drug pathway or the food pathway, or any of the other pathways that might be available, such as botanical medicine. There's several major types of products that are approvable under the FDCA, and it covers anything that makes a claim that falls in that class. So if you have something on the label that makes that claim, or if it contains something that they've approved for making a different claim, then it belongs to them, according to the FDA. And they have an extremely good win-loss record in court.
Has that already happened too much to like go in and say, we're not going to make any claims about this? This is just a product, but it's already happened out in the air too much for that to...
Well, it's difficult to square that with having state medical programs is the issue.
Okay.
With adult use, that's a lot easier. You can change, the product labeling. That's a question of that gets into a much grayer area in terms of the authorities and such. But the medical programs really, they give uses in statute for what's permitted. So there's a presumption for the FDA that state use is what it's being used for, which then brings in their whole jurisdiction. It's a fun mess.
One way or another.
Yeah.
They'll slide around and get you. And we talked about the current state of affairs and how crazy it is. The potential for change, though, the potential for this to actually, the proposal before the Senate. What do we think about that?
Well, I before I let Randall just murder this one, because I would have to say, I mean, he's the most knowledgeable person when it comes to cannabis policy, and so we're having a field day with this new bill. But I'll say this one thing: there's a very different quality of optimism in the air, in that it's coming from the majority leader. Usually, we have a situation where even if somebody's pushing something, it's not going to get airtime, and that's just the bottom line. And this is the first opportunity that this country's ever had where the person that's pushing the legislation is actually holding, is the one directing the flow of airtime.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be really interesting, and I think we have a real opportunity to get something done in a meaningful way.
Oh, absolutely.
So
No.
what is in the what's in the current bill? What do we like? What do we don't like? What kind of chances they have?
So I'll openly admit that I have not read Leader Schumer's bill yet. They have not released it yet, but I've had a couple of conversations with some people knowledgeable on the topic, and what we are expecting to be in the bill is descheduling, a good deschedule, federal regulatory framework that does respect the existing adult use and medical programs in the states, while ensuring that we do have that interstate trade and interstate commerce, and that we're looking at a good, strong set of retroactivity provisions, such as with the MORE Act, going use.
Well, we hate to hear the sirens on this show, just PTSD kind of a thing, But
Yeah.
My apologies. I was
you
too
can't
close to the motorcade.
you can't help it. No, fact is, on a federal level, we talked about a couple of things. You mentioned the rider that prevents the DEA from being able to expend funds to prosecute state legal cannabis programs. A rider is an amendment to a spending bill. And the reason that we had to do that over the last 8 years, get positive cannabis things done through riders, is because Mitch McConnell sat in that Senate Majority Leader's spot, and he refused to allow any positive bills to pass through the Senate, even when they were passed by overwhelming majorities in the House. So now we have the opportunity to pass them through regular methods. But if that doesn't work, we can always still use the rider. Isn't that true, Randall?
Absolutely. And just recently, the House did pass the McClintock rider, which is the adult use protection, to expand on the current protections. They did put in a safe banking rider and expanded the criminal justice subcommittee grants, the burn jag grants, to actually even reach expungement possibilities in the state. So we've been working on making sure that we do carry on the appropriation strategy. Rez is someone who likes to make sure we cover plans A, B, C, D, all the way to Z, and then get back to AA in terms of lobbying strategy. So we are making sure to cover those appropriations aspects as we're lobbying through, and those are very important things to keep in. We've had those riders in place for almost 5-6 years now, and they have been the entire growth of the industry in many ways. From a legalistic perspective, it's the thing that's removed allowed the specter of federal prosecution and allowed businesses to have some stability to grow since we started seeing programs developed in the 1990s. And that is all critical to continue as we move towards these federal legalization efforts. So what's good with the descheduling bills that we see from Leader Schumer and that we see coming out of the House from Chairman Nadler is that they're trying very hard to make sure that we carry the commercial success into the future of the cannabis industry, because it is a commercial success, and it's important to keep growing this industry and to keep it competitive and vibrant as we start to compete and enter new markets. Because right now we're talking about a certain set of markets and a certain set of areas, but American cannabis is sold globally right now, and it'll be sold globally in the future. The only question is how much legal businesses are going to be selling it.
One of the things we're concerned about here in Michigan, when you talk about things like interstate travel, interstate commerce, is that some of the inexpensive stockpiled cannabis from Western states like Oregon and Washington and California and Colorado would be imported to Michigan and therefore undercut our market, destroy our business opportunities, and really make chaos for the people who've invested millions and their life savings in order to pioneer this industry here. Clearly, Michigan would have to approve interstate commerce opportunities, even if the federal government were to say it's okay to do it now. Would that be true?
No. The Dormant Commerce Clause requires states that engage in this commerce not to unduly burden the interstate commerce from other states. So as long as a product complies with the rules and regulations of Michigan and the federal legalized scheme, it can be sent to Michigan, and Michigan can send elsewhere to other legal states. It's the undue burden rule of interstate commerce. So Michigan. So the other point that I'm making results of it is right now there's about 6 million pounds of stuff that's frozen right now in Oregon. That's the backstock everyone's worried about. California exports 13 million pounds a year. That is the thing that undercuts the legal marketplace in the interstate commerce. It is the millions and millions of pounds routinely grown outside of the regulated marketplace that is already transported in interstate commerce with no overhead, no regulatory compliance cost, and no testing. And those things are questions that from a competitive perspective, that's the real thing to be worried about. Oregon, in a legalized environment, could be shipping that to Canada, where I think everyone here is of the opinion that American-grown weed is probably better than Canadian-grown weed. So Oregon, likely, at that, I wouldn't even imagine necessarily that it would come to the United States in a federally legalized environment. If I'm Oregon, that cannabis is more valuable outside the United States from an export perspective, gram for gram, dollar for dollar.
Well, of course, Canada already has a 3-year supply backlog there, too. They overproduced and oversupplied, so they're not looking for imports from the United States anytime soon, regardless of quality. They're all full. And they've
begun some deals with some South American countries for international trade, and they're ahead of us.
Yeah. Oh, no. Canada and Germany both big exporters.
We have a deal exporting into Germany. There's a lot of activity. We have something going on in Colombia. I mean, there's even special economic zone being created in Africa. That is, there's so much going on now in terms of global trade and the industry as it's developing. I did want to throw one quick caveat out there. The language. After a full review and analysis of the text, and subsequently a comment period, call it 45 days, where we'll start to have a real idea of what this is going to materialize, right? And we're going to have a better idea of what we need to be concerned about, what we need to really focus on, what's consistent with the principles and the positions that we work as an organization, and it's really going to be a let's wait and see. And I would say it's not just the full review of the text, but it's what happens in that comment period. How does that conversation develop? What are the devils in the details? Because make no mistake about it, I usually would expect to see something when I do the review myself. I'm pretty sure, and we can touch base about this afterwards. There's going to be some moment where I'm like, "Fuck no!" When I see it, and they're all right. It is right. I'm just excited to see what that looks like this time.
Yeah, and so do we have a reason to believe that this deviates much from the MORE Act that passed in the Congress in the last session?
Well, that's the thing is we hear so much that you don't want to necessarily take, even if it's a trusted source and it's somebody that's as correct, as possible. There's so many variations of things that we hear, and then when it comes out, you see that maybe it was just a misinterpretation. They weren't trying to do a straight. They were just misinterpreting because it's very technical. Sometimes it's written, in double negatives. They love really, making it difficult.
Prosecutor-friendly language is what that is. Yeah.
But what it is,
I don't know what this was a part of, but I heard somewhere that they're going to keep tobacco companies out or big corporations out to allow for smaller businesses to thrive.
That's a perfect example. So I've heard something similar, and they didn't specify that it was going to be tobacco, big alcohol, pharma, or MSO, but just that there would be some effort to, put anti-monopolistic, anti-protectionist language in there. That we've heard similar types of discussion on some of the DEI portion of what to expect. I think at the end of the day, that's all byproduct of drafters of the legislation having to appease so many people that they write it in a way where even if they're saying one thing, they're presenting it in a convoluted enough manner that it's not offensive to the other side. And that's the kind of shit that I want to sift through before I really, form an opinion on how I feel about what's going on.
Yeah, the move towards political correctness in legislation can really be dangerous.
So I remember there were two things in the MORE Act that I didn't particularly care for. One was a restriction on those who had previous cannabis felonies being able to join. I'm sure you hate that one. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if many people know, but Rez has had experience himself with that whole thing. So
100%. And I think we've tracked. They're going to take a close look at that. The security provision of that. They call it the clearance provision. And I think that and this is just my hunch. This isn't because I know anything directly from it. I think there was a lot of blowback from Biden administration cutting individuals for prior cannabis use, enough blowback to where the drafters of this bill probably put some some pen to paper on that specifically. I wouldn't count that out. You see what's specifically happened with the Olympics and the amount of press that's gotten in the last few days. I can see that even further solidifying the issue and support thereof. So I don't anticipate any deviation from that. I think we'll see along those lines.
And then the other thing that I didn't care for was 5% tax. One of the struggles in states has been not making the taxes too high so you can stay competitive, stuff that's outside of the commercial market. So that really has a burden on. Was that a concern for you guys too?
Oh, absolutely. We're, it's important to have a combined federal, state, and local tax effective rate that ensures competitiveness with the industry, especially when we look at different tax rates among different states. Those are things that states are going to have to get more uniform and equalized when it comes to excesses and retail taxes. Too high of a tax rate, it gets exactly to that concern of interstate commerce. You want to make American cannabis non-competitive in interstate trade or international trade, tax it to death. That's how you do it.
I'm so against the taxing shit to death. I mean, operating a business in California, blood's all over the calculator. I've been eating shit for years, I swear, on how hard we get taxed with excise tax and cultivation tax and every kind of tax in the world. But I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. I gotta keep it fucking 100 with you. The same thing that I said earlier about filling the vacuum before someone fills it for me. I feel like that on tax on where they pin the tax at, and I cap it to 4 or 5%. Let's just say, do I want it? Fuck no. Do I know that it's something that's a reality and that's part of the grease that's going to move the wheel across? Absolutely. And when I see that, then my concern starts to become make sure that they don't pick it to death, which they have a tendency to do, because they will, and we got to cap it at something reasonable like 4 or 5, so that it isn't taxed to death. And that's my honest opinion on it. Just because I'm always trying to compromise with everybody, even the most evil forces in the room, because I know it's not going to move forward without a buy-in from everybody. A true negotiated. It doesn't make me happy, but fuck it, I can live with it. It's going to look like something like that for us to really move this forward.
I think when you tee up something like that, from our perspective in Michigan, working on state policy for a lot, is we think in terms of setting the stage for incremental gain thereafter, not just locking in some kind of very difficult system to try to crack later on just to get something moving. There were many people that were okay with that, and we were not here. We probably waited a little bit longer to get to it because of that, but
sometimes that's for the best. The feds, that's definitely one of those times. I mean, look, the tax rate, 5% that we put in, I'll give you a little run from the backroom deals and everything that happened last Congress. That was a negotiated rate. You should have heard what the initial proposition was. It was not that low by any stretch. And we fought tooth and nail on that one from GSCC's perspective.
There's somebody who's fighting for the higher tax.
No.
Don't you peg them for somebody that doesn't understand that the activity is going to go on anyway, so
And then we also got to think about the tax the following year. Just because we get the rate this year and it gets locked in doesn't mean 5 years from now or 2 years from now, Congress is going to say, well, if we change that one line in this one statute, it gives us another $20 billion to spend on this pet project in my district. So I'm going to go do that. That kind of stuff happens regularly when we talk about those processes. So one of the things that we also focus on is trying to put in a moratorium, make sure that it's actually stuck at a rate we can predict for a period of time so you can orient the business.
Right on. So it's going to be a tough road, it seems like, because we have the Biden who kind of seemed with Kamala Harris that they were going to be open to some of this stuff, maybe even open to some better, just well-known policy or something, but it has not cracked the priority for him. He's done a few things, I guess, but
hey, Jamie, let's get it straight. The optimism for finally making a move, in Canada on cannabis at the federal level was because of the shift, what you mentioned earlier about shifting Mitch out because he had been in opposition to it for some
right.
years.
Yep, the Senate majority changing.
Yep. Yeah. The White House, just because of Kamala Harris's, longstanding position or role as super cop in California, I think there's a healthy amount of skepticism. But then I also believe that because of the new awakening around, the role that cannabis reform can play in criminal justice reform, social justice, and the new, attention surrounding that, I think Kamala Harris is, primed to have 180 and be in support. But, Joe Biden doesn't seem to be, really a friend or an ally of cannabis. And it's okay that he's not, at some point he just has to understand, where everything's at and have his finger on the pulse of the country and the world for that matter. But it's not like I think any of us are under the impression that the White House is trying to push something forward on the cannabis issue.
But I guess the best we have is some of the discussion from Schumer, Booker, and others saying that when they have something reasonable to present to the president, they get something through the legislature that he'll likely sign it at that point.
Well, that or he commits political suicide.
Okay, so good. That's fine.
Yeah. I think Randall's right. The pressure's there, right?
To be fair, he doesn't even need to sign the bill. He can just let it be, and it becomes law.
Yeah. I mean, to get to that 60, to get buy-in from both parties, especially at a time in our country where you can't get buy-in from both parties on literally anything, to be in a position where the majority of the country has passed some type of medical or adult use law, and the majority of people in this country think that it's time that it's descheduled at a federal level. I think any opposition to that is political suicide for anybody. And more and more people are understanding that. They're getting the message, and they're getting on board.
It's a 70% issue. That's not something you use the veto pen for typically.
What do you guys believe that they'll, by the end of maybe this term, there's a possibility, or the midterm's going to change things so much that now we're going to have to be challenged again with a different composition of decision makers?
I mean, I would even go as far as to use this as an opportunity to put further pressure on them to make it happen in that window, because it is going to be highly politicized if they don't. And that's the reality, right? Now that there's a vehicle to move this forward, and that's going back to why I said it's so important, the comment period over the next couple months, and what this forms into, because if this is the vehicle that gets pushed forward, and again, let's just be realistic, if there's competing pieces of legislation that are being moved forward, and one of them happens to come from the majority leader's desk, which one do you think is going to get moved forward? Right. And it'll also be naive to think that it's not going to be highly politicized going into elections. So there are people far more in tune with what's going on Capitol Hill than myself, that understand, that are advising all of their bosses on where the cannabis issue is and where they need to be on it, especially when they're forced to take action in it in committee, forced to take action on the floor, and then if you're the White House, forced to take action or inaction when it hits your desk. So at this point, I think, as long as that vehicle moves forward and gets buy-in from all of the, from both sides and the advocacy groups and the trades and everybody, right? It's going to be important. Then I think we'll have something to move forward. Are there going to be fights, inner fighting on a lot of the issues there, especially, amongst the aforementioned groups? Absolutely. Do we know, how that fight's gonna pan out? No, but that's also why it's so important that everybody that's on this podcast right now, on their forums and making the differences they can make, are continuing to be vocal and getting the message out. That's why it's important that the work that Randall and I do, bridging some of the gap from what we're doing at the local levels or with our companies to these conversations where oftentimes, nobody in the room is even a true cannabis business operator, let alone a small business cannabis operator, and they're making these decisions, need to understand how they affect us.
Yeah, there's this group of bureaucrats, like the heads or the directors of many of the marijuana programs from different states that have combined forces to create a consulting group for federal policy on this. And some of those people are not necessarily bad, but I felt the same way. None of those people really understand cannabis, and they're significantly contributing these ideas to, the federal decision makers and potential policy and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. It's a shame because we'll be working through some of these issues, and in live time, they will, say things that really, highlight their ignorance, their lack of understanding of the issue or appreciation for the impact that their decision has on people that, that actually use. And we're not even going into, medical patients or business owners or the medical or financial implications. I'm talking about people that just smoke weed. If you don't even smoke weed, like, the fuck you have even commenting on this, right? It's like they're mansplaining to me what, how to feel about smoking weed when they don't even smoke themselves. And they're also given some, disproportionate amount of influence in what the laws are going to look like that affect all of our lives when they don't even smoke. So, I mean, I take issue with that. And try not to come off so much as a vigilante when I'm in those rooms, because I know they already don't want me in those rooms quite often. But I think it's an important perspective to bring.
Well, similarly, the some of the companies that we talk about that we have issues with here, with the MCMA and so forth, I would say the same thing. They don't understand this. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand the nature. And without those things, they're not making really good decisions. That's why they're actually trying to hurt other segments of activity, thinking that it's going to then, force all those people who are still looking for cannabis into their stores. It's an exposure of ignorance. I guess it's easier to deal with the politicians, maybe on some level. I don't know. We haven't gone that far that fast with some. We know we're always trying to catch up to what the public consciousness is.
It's not easy, either of the groups, quite frankly, lack of appreciation or understanding of the plant and the industry and the history is the same no matter where you find it, right? Whether it's in politics or in business, it's the same.
Those decisions are being made, and without that information, you can't expect to make a great decision, I guess.
A reason that you see shitty products in market, because ultimately somebody's green lighting them that doesn't smoke them themselves, and that's part of the problem. And it's the same thing for policy. Like, these people, the policy doesn't affect them, so they're green lighting shitty policy. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They just move forward, and now they're green lighting some other shitty policy in some other industry that they have no business opining on, because that's where they've been hired and directed. This is a unique makeup of activists and lobbyists, because you have an issue that people have been so charged about for so many years that impacted so many people's lives, that there's a common thread that they've created where all these people can connect because of the experience they've had, with the injustices of cannabis prohibition. Like, it's something they've created. They've created an army almost of people all over, not just this country, but the world. Remember, the United States led a lot of the global treaties that have created the disfavorable cannabis laws in countries all over the world. And the DEA is a global organization, unlike any of our other agencies. So, I mean, this is something that the blood is on our hands.
Right. No, we pushed this policy, and it shows up very similarly. I agree. You can see the processes are the same, the raids, taking people's shit, all that stuff.
Really interesting experience. When I was in law school and I studied overseas in France, studying international controlled substance law, and specifically international cannabis, and I found that there was like a really vibrant hatred for those scholars that understood the United States' role in international drug policy, because at the time we had already started passing our medical laws in our states. And so they're looking at us as the ultimate hypocrites. And they're like, you guys are passing these laws, legalizing, essentially keeping in place this international, kind of framework of treaties that are creating this, this atmosphere globally towards the cannabis plant. And it's the most hypocritical thing in the fucking world. Right. And I appreciate that. I mean, I think there's a lot there that we need to unpack, and that's why I think it's so important.
And the UN made a little bit of a move on that.
Yeah.
Earlier, yeah. Right. So.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it's opportune time because, again, just like the conversation we had about politics in Washington, D.C. and how it's political suicide to not get on board, that's true everywhere in the world, whether you're the Pope or whether you're the UN. I think everybody's kind of on the same page now on cannabis, and that's something everybody should be proud of. That got it this far, but there's still a little bit of work to do to really keep undoing that.
So we do have to wind down here. We'll probably go just a couple minutes over, but we do have to start the descent. Definitely want to talk to you guys again. There's other issues we could talk about, but certainly after the policy's been put on the table and it's been read and digested and thought about a little bit, that'd be nice to come back and get an update on what it looks like and what those processes look like it's heading toward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you don't mind, leave us with any parting words, any contact info, point us to anything that you think is important.
I just want to thank you guys for having us on, and it's always a pleasure. Really appreciate all of the work that you're doing, and want to be able to help out in any way we can, whether it's just coming on and sharing the updates of where everything's at federally and where how that affects all of us at the state level, or flipping the script and getting more entrenched in what's happening at the state level, and how we can come in and help in that direction. So just again, always a pleasure, and appreciate your guys' time and having us on. And if you have any other questions, for sure we'd be happy to come on. Definitely after not just the text comes out, but more importantly, after some of the conversations start to take form, it's important for us to leverage the platforms that we've created to bring awareness and attention to where these battles are being fought, because that's where we really, can start to bend the ear of those decision makers in Washington when they realize that their constituency feels really strongly about a certain, issue or provision in the text. And it's just about, connecting those dots and highlighting that. So looking forward to doing that.
Right on. Thank you very much. Hey, Randall, you want to leave us with
I think Rez covered it good. Thank you guys so much for having me. Looking forward to coming back when you're out.
Yeah, really appreciate it, both you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Rick, you were had a little trouble toward the end there, coming in and out of the thing. Anything you want to add or contribute to this?
It's always tough when that happens. When you miss a couple of minutes, you never know what was said and what wasn't said. But what we saw today was that cannabis activism is still very much alive. We talked earlier in the show about local actions to protect Judith Pontius, and potentially the September 15th caregiver rally on the steps of the Capitol building. That's an important feature too. Then we
incidentally on that though, on Medical Mondays last night, a few people in the comments were suggesting, Rez, that you show up there. for this grassroots effort and
Yeah.
hang there with us. September 15th.
If they bring that up, I was already planning on making it. My wife's gonna have a baby any day now, and so August, September, that'll be a couple months. It'll be a perfect time for me to, get out of the house and come join you guys.
Awesome.
So count me in.
All right. Sounds good.
Sorry.
September 15th. But the fact is, local actions, statewide actions, and we talked about potential federal actions too. Other states have done some different things with cannabis. We see some outrageous stories like that one from Alabama where the child was taken from the family simply for possessing cannabis. There's still a lot of work to do. And those of us on the show are certainly one of those people, one of those groups of people leading the forefront, but everybody has to contribute. Everyone has to help. When we call for assistance, be there. When we ask to write letters, write letters. When we ask you to show up, show up. When we ask you to buy or don't buy, do it. I'm done.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Rick. Adam, you had a little bit of a hiatus during the show.
Yeah.
But any final thoughts?
No, it was a good show. I appreciate you guys, and we certainly have a long way to go. This is really just, in my opinion, the beginning of where cannabis is going to go. So, we have a long way to go.
It's interesting to get deeper into the reality of some federal action. And, right? Yeah, I really appreciate you guys being so on the forefront of that.
I'd love to see them just deschedule, but we know that would create a mess. So they need to correct some of the wrongs that they've created by creating all these crazy laws.
Yeah, right on. Jim, coming off not feeling too well, but you made it on today, and
Yeah, I did. The
appreciate
whole long
that.
haul. What a great show, start to finish, guys. We got the momentum. It's moving. Everybody stay active with your reps and write those letters and do those things that Rick pointed out. Yeah, great. Next NTO show is going to be August 6th, 4 o'clock. It's a Friday. Then we have the NTO Fest September 19th, 2021.
That's awesome. Right on. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Great show again, Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We'll be back next week, and I'll definitely be in touch. Thanks, Rez. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Yep.
Bye-bye now.